Hi, my name is Lauren Lavoie. I'm providing a series of lectures on the consciousness, and I wanted to share what I've found so far in my work with in consciousness studies. I've been in the field of spiritual studies for over 25 years. And I've had the honor, privilege really, to work with some of the most incredible teachers. And I'm probably not going to look into the camera that much because it's distracting. And, it creates an echo of the self repeatedly, which is one of the things that I'm going to get into. The work that I'm presenting is work that can be, or techniques that can be practiced, which will take you toward and into divinity. The basic, what I've decided is to present a body of work that will allow people to travel in the astral world, but I first, want to explain why that is so. It's so critical to do certain presets, as we call them, which is basically stacking motives. And so, if you look up astral travel today, in 2012, you'll find an inordinate amount of misinformation, misconception as a result of individuals entering into the astral world through the binary consciousness, which is really not the binary consciousness or material consciousness or ego, which I'm going to discuss. It's not designed to navigate the astral. And if you are navigating the astral through the binary consciousness, the dualistic consciousness, you'll not ever be able to transcend the third or fourth plane. And so this is why you will encounter a great deal of, nouns and adjectives to describe demonic presences and angelic presences, and you'll find a gamut of dualism. And it's not necessary to remain. There's a way to navigate the astral without the use of the lesser consciousness, the ego. And so I'm going to talk about that, which means I'm going to talk about the ultra consciousness, which is something that you can experience yourself. I'd like to remind you that everything that I say is clearly speculation and theory until you have your own experiences of it. So the body of my work is irrelevant unless it inspires individuals to take action that deliver to them experiences, and B, that they're able to have a degree of success with my work. But basically what I'm trying to say is that it's not possible to judge or discriminate, however wisely, the nature or essence, value of the work that I'm going to present to you without having your own experiences, which will be risk-based. So anytime there's, the development of a cocoon within the ego construct, which can provide a version of your personality and your, it supports, produces fear and specific desires out of a belief system. And so I'm going to discuss that too, is how to overcome your limiting belief system. And, hopefully you will listen to the series before making a judgment about their value. And I will use, there are certain terms that I want to express to you so that I can speak freely later. I want to express certain terms to you. when I speak about the ego, what I'm speaking about is a vehicle that is a automatic production structure that is an aspect of our consciousness, but what it does is it inverts and reflects the true consciousness back at yourself. So the ego is a non-real, real illusion, but it's, and I'll explain illusion and reality in just a moment, in my view, what that means. But the movement, the activity of the mind is based on the adherence to or alignment with the ego structure. So that's, when I say mind, what I'm speaking about is not the contemplative or creative thought process that is produced as a result of an inquiry into discovery or imagination or etc. I'm speaking about the ego's version of creative consciousness, the vehicle of the intellect, in which thought is dominant, in the sense of it describing for us or rendering reality to us through it. And so I'm not creating a division between the ego and the intellect. It's really critical that you understand that. Once an individual's aligned to the ego, they will, by nature, be within the realm of thought, which is the realm of illusion. So in the work that I'm presenting, ego is meant to produce lessons. Intellect is really more of a tool than a guide in this work. When I say the word Christ, the Christ, Baal, speaker, God incarnate or God in physical form, I am not speaking of the religious rendition or version of those entities. I'm speaking about entities that have managed with great faith to overcome or die to the lesser self, the ego, and become the ultra consciousness, and I'll explain in a moment what I mean by that, and then went on from that to expand their interconnectedness to God consciousness. So in essence, when I speak of the yogis, the masters, the Christ speakers, including Jesus Christ, John the Baptist, Elijah, and possibly Saint Thomas, Yogananda, Paramahansa Yogananda, and Baba, who's currently in Belgium. I'm speaking about people that not only overcame the lesser self, but were able to adapt their consciousness fully to the ultra conscious, to God conscious. I'm not going to describe what God conscious is because I don't know. I don't know what it is. I have had an experience of Christ consciousness which is available to anyone, and you'll see that if you read the Gnostics, which I'll talk a little bit about, the Gnostic Gospels. You'll see that it was at one point made very clear to the populace that they were intended to transcend the ego consciousness and experience the Christ consciousness. So when I say Christ, I'm not comparing myself to Christ. I'm not suggesting that anyone is supposed to adopt that entity's role. Jesus Christ is other than, Jesus the Christ is other than the Christ consciousness. So Jesus, in my view, was a yogi, similar to Paramahansa Yogananda and several others, Babaji, and you may be familiar with these entities. The other thing is that when I speak about when I speak about inspansion, I am going, and I'm going to get into that fairly deeply, because inspansion is a movement of consciousness which actually goes within to discover the ultra consciousness within the self. And so it's critical that you understand that there is a warp that makes it appear that reality emanates from outside of us, which it doesn't. It emanates from within the consciousness. Your consciousness is projecting its version of the world through either the ego, or if you're detached from the ego, then you'll be actually receiving the greater reality from the world around you, not blocking it, and projecting light naturally from your ultra consciousness. And so I said all that to say that as a practice, the practice of the principles that I'm going to share with you, and the lifestyle that's necessary, either inwardly or outwardly or both, that must be adopted to accomplish astral travel, is basically the practice itself. Let me word that better. What I'm going to share with you are principles of spiritual practices, or principles that are meant to be practiced, that will not only allow you to confront your egotistical weaknesses or challenges, but will allow you to transcend most of your difficulties, and you can, at that point, when you transcend the lower consciousness or the material consciousness, you can... My cat wants to listen to me speak in a language that he doesn't understand. Basically, what I'm going to do is share with you not only how to overcome a particular kind of trouble that we face on the planet, but to travel the other astral planes, which this is one of. This is the most dense plane. So the ego structure is a bubble. It's a sphere, basically. If your arms are outstretched, the ego is limited to its ability to reach beyond the wrists, which is great because it always means that humans can, work or create with their hands outside of the influence of the ego. And that's why you'll see a lot of movement in Tai Chi or other practices, especially Qigong. There's sweeping movements that move way outside of, relative to the ego, outside of the ego's illusionary or delusionary state or product. So that structure that I'm describing is a bubble that surrounds the consciousness when we're aligned with it. And what the structure does, it doesn't have a will of its own. It is dark-inducing, and it is referred to as Lucifer or Satan because of its amazing ability to fracture single or whole aspects or entities in reality into dualistic seeming entities. So what the ego basically does is it inverts and reflects the true nature or your ultra consciousness back at yourself. So this is why we must learn to view reality from a selfless standpoint. And so when I say selfless, what I'm speaking about are the two selves, basically, that we have. the inverted self, which is the ego product, and the ultra consciousness, or the true self. I should say very quickly that when I speak of the word God, I'm not implying any particular rendition of a God. There are several aspects to God which I believe are there's a duality to God that is not the same kind of duality that we find in the ego. The ego is capable of fracturing each duality that it fractures. So, in other words, since the true self is a manifestation or creation of God, it is interconnected with all that is, basically. So, as a result, it will not ever find itself in a state where it renders or regards itself as superior or inadequate to any other entity. The reason why we suffer from fits or spells of inferiority and or superiority is because of the adherence or alignment or attention given to or need for, desire for what the ego produces. And so you'll see that the ego, with every single aspect in the greater reality, the ego will not bend it, but it will fracture it into two polar opposites. And so when and if you're in the ego, you'll experience a illusion. Depending on the degree that you've gone, the depth that you've gone into the ego, you'll experience a degree of delusion relative to superiority or inferiority. So, as you're obviously aware, there are many dualities that plague the human mind. The issue of even connectedness and separation, and the fracture of separation into the justification or reason why we're separate. If we're separate because of our lack of status or our elitism, that we feel superior over other individuals that are inadequate or inferior to us, that form of separation is delusionary, but it seems very real. And so obviously these are challenges. If you are intending to transcend or overcome these types of challenges, this is the kind of work that you want to do. And not to say that there aren't many other forms or movements of spiritual practice that, and there may be some that they're more suited to your needs. I believe that all of us are responsible and had agreed before we incarnated that we would do everything that we could to overcome the ego. It's when you stop and think about it, and you may want to contemplate this later, but if it's true what I'm saying, that the ego inverts and then reflects back towards our consciousness, a version of the consciousness that is polarized, fractured, and opposite of our true nature, it would only make sense that it would speak, when it speaks to us, that it wouldn't believe in or support our attempts or venture into fulfilling our purpose for coming to the planet in the first place. So, in that sense, if that's all true, that we came here for a particular reason, that we have a particular path, that we have particular gifts, that when fulfilling them alleviates us of the ego, it makes sense to learn how the mechanisms or how the ego perpetuates itself through our attention, focus, belief, fear, etc. So, obviously, when an individual acquires an understanding, or I wouldn't say understanding, but a knowingness of their essence equality to others, it basically suggests that for the most part they no longer believe in the product of superiority and inferiority. They no longer believe in the illusion of separation. Well, it depends. It depends on how far you go with whichever egotistical fractures that you suffer or benefit from, seemingly benefit from. In my case, the indulgence in my ego has only, after learning the truth, my re-indulgence in the ego has only wasted my time and prevented me from living in the greater reality. The basic, from what I've gathered, the basic deal here is that there are two forms of selflessness that I would normally speak about to individuals that are interested, and the one, the inward movement towards selflessness, the second, the outward lifestyle of selfless living. Both of those are important, but the inward, it's up to you whether you, I find the inward it's fast-paced development or discovery and clarification of the seeming limitations that I encounter in my ignorant or my naive adherence to illusion. And so, but to be honest with you, I had a lot of trouble with meditation and the movement of inward expansion before I had learned to live a lifestyle of selfless service, or had made that commitment, which I resisted for a long time. But the basic thing is that, and what I've learned is that in order to naturally, or without effort, without suppression or ruling the ego, which obviously would bind us to it. I shouldn't say obviously, but basically when individuals try to suppress an aspect of their ego or enhance an aspect of their ego, they bind themselves to it. And so the idea is, or the question is, how do you overcome the ego in an effortless way? With effort, obviously, because too much passivity or indifference will drift back into the ego, and too much intention or embrace, because we can't overindulge in the ego. I mean, we can overindulge in a spiritual principle and wind up back in the ego. So there is a balance point, there's a center point. And unfortunately or fortunately, that center point changes on a daily basis. So it is true that the ego does, because it's material based, it's affected by the movement of the planets, the sun, and the moon. So I did fail to mention that, unfortunately. The thought and the ego of which it's born is material base, unlike the ultra consciousness, your true self, which is pretty much why we get the movement downward. We have the negative ego and the positive ego. So we not only have this bipolar aspect of the material consciousness, but it's actually pulled, even the positive is pulled by gravity. So it helps, though. It simplifies things. In the sense that also in meditation, if you truly let go, And I mean truly let go, even to the point of letting go of the concept of letting go, which is of the ego, or the intellectual. So you understand, it gets very tricky. But when you really let go, you will tend to float unless there's a lot of soot and pollution in your physical system. So the floating is natural, and this is why effortless effort works, because when there's the light effort to let go of that which we adhered to prior to, because obviously we wouldn't have to let go of something we weren't holding on to in the first place. When you let go, though, you'll feel lighter. When you truly let go, when you truly surrender, you'll feel lighter. And this is part of the movement inward. In meditation, basically what I do to access the ultra consciousness is I let go of my ego. And the way that I do that is that I allow my ego to be whatever it is. So the interactive or entanglement ceases because I'm accepting what it is. And you can either ignore it, which will basically happen naturally if you move towards quietness. So the more that you let go in meditation and move to the center, and let go of that center and move to the next center, and let go of that illusionary center and move to the next center, the less static or activity will be contributed to or put into the ego. And you'll notice this when your eyes are closed. You'll see a degree of activity, electrical kind of activity, and as you let go, in truth, that activity will diminish to the point, if you do this honestly and authentically and with faith, you'll eventually realize that you're surrounded by the greater consciousness. So it's very interesting, because the greater consciousness, the reason why people miss it oftentimes, and I did for a long time, is that its degree of silence or quietness is unbelievable to me. Still to this day, it's amazing how loud I can become in my material consciousness. And but basically what happened with me is that what I ran into are these several troubles. I ran into the problem of the bipolar construct of my consciousness, in that if you're looking in meditation, if your eyes are closed and you're looking through either or both the physical visual system, the ego basically imprints, and it's not permanent, but it imprints, and there's a natural cause too, but there's an imprint with the visual system wherein the right eye will be, and it may be opposite for you, but the right eye will have a tendency towards a isolating, penetrating, almost like a cone. It basically has this nature where it seems to focus more so on the particles in reality, like the trees of a forest, not the forest itself, the bricks in a wall, not the wall itself, etc. And the other eye has the tendency to do the opposite, to focus on the whole first. The problem with this is that you can take your central, or your vision, the single, I shouldn't call it single. The vision chakra is in the center of the two physical eyes. And if you're not familiar with chakras, it's irrelevant. You basically need to be, well, it's up to you if you want to get into the chakra thing. The reason why I say this is because the ultra conscious doesn't operate in chakras. So when we're dealing with chakras in the physical system, in healing, or we're still in the egotistical, emotional, physical, psychological. So, and I'm not talking about any of that. I'm talking about letting go of all that. But the one thing, the heart chakra, the heart itself, and the vision chakra are actually aspects of the ultra consciousness. So we want to pay great attention to those two. But basically what we're doing when we're meditating is that you're going to have this trouble, perhaps not, but you're probably going to have this trouble where you're trying to, if you attempt to, access the vision chakra or the sight through the dualism or binary focal points of the physical visual system. So this is not what you want to do. What you want to do is allow yourself to relax completely, as you probably know, and you may also want to breathe in light and exhale light and soot in order to increase your central energetic system. As you relax, less and less energy will be attributed to the ego and the physical body. Your physical body may go a little numb, which is good. It just basically means that you're drawing energy or allowing energy to flow more through the center, which is where you'll find eventually you'll find the greater consciousness is back through the center and outward. And I'll get into this in a minute, but the idea is to let go of the adherence or attachment or habit of viewing or moving the consciousness through the visual system. And so what we want to make sure we're doing is we're not pulling the visual material consciousness and that polarity, those two polarized aspects, into the vision chakra. This is critical. And again, this is why you're going to find a lot of really odd statements on the web about astral travel and spiritual development, etc. What we're doing actually in this work is that we're letting go of the need for the thought matrix or network. The consciousness doesn't need the movement of thought in order to form or comprehend enlightenment, light, or knowledge directly. It doesn't need to pass through thought in order to do it. And that's something that you should understand right now. Belief is the issue, not thought. The ego produces, if the ego is taught or an individual chooses a positive outlook on life, you can take that positive outlook and drive yourself into insanity. It's not about thought here. It's not about the positive and negative. It's not about those base raw dualities. It's about thoughtlessness. And so what we're doing is we allow ourselves to come to center. The reason why I say the word allow, and the reason why letting go and surrender works, is because the original self came first. It would be different if the false self came first. It would make sense to trudge through the false self and climb or crawl into the true self, but that's not true. So basically, because the true self is the originator of the false self and its projection inwardly, outwardly, whatever, the idea, and thank God, is that you can simply let go. You have to be attentive to remaining awake and focused gently. So you don't want to be too focused, because you'll start to impede the flow of energy, which is the reality of your true self. So you don't want to wear shoes inside the house. You don't want to have hat. You don't want to have anything that impedes flow, especially inwardly. It's best to do meditation naked. This way we know that the ego's not blanketed upon the physical body. And it's symbolically, it's not just a symbol, it's not just a spiritual thing to do. We're actually we are disrobing the ego. So there's a mechanic here that I want to accomplish in my expression of this, and basically, once you truly let go of the duality of the ego, and you let go of thought. As you learn to do this, and it may take time, it probably will take some time, but you'll start to feel a vibration here in the vision chakra. And this is something that you can fall into. The deeper you go here, what's happening is when you peer beyond this veil of darkness, when your eyes are closed, when you peer deeply into the emanation point from which you'll start to see a flood, a slow-moving flood of like a wavy movement of energy. What you're doing at this point, when you see that, it's almost like a foggy, what's the word? It's a movement of energy that's almost wave-like. Once you go through that, you're going to see a structural version of that wave form. We always have this duality in the astral, but it's a lighter form of this reality in terms of the duality of it. When you get, all you're basically doing is you're allowing yourself to pass deeper into the real. And so we're not going into, it's mysterious, but we're not going away from the security of reality. We're actually going towards what is producing this projection of reality around us. So there's no fear here really that's necessary. So basically, what's going to happen, just so you're not surprised, I'm going to speak about the point at which the ego gets really threatened. And so just please don't mistake the fact that because you're letting go of the ego, what we're doing actually is we're letting go of what we're conscious of in the ego. So we're not letting go yet of the aspect of the greater consciousness that believes in the deceit or the falsehoods that the ego has, that we, in a sense, maybe when we adopted these beliefs or whatever, it doesn't matter, but what the ego has taught the true self. There is an aspect of the true self that is like, it's maybe the child aspect of the greater consciousness. I'm not entirely certain, but you'll see why I bring this up now in a little bit. Basically, that wave, the emanation of that wave is something that you just want to let go of. You can go into it, but you're basically, there are 3 of these wave structure dynamics that you're going to pass through, actually probably 4. 5 is basically the state that we want to get to. Just so there's no misunderstanding about what you may encounter, you're going to probably, there will be a point in traversing these planes, and remember that what we're heading toward is the projection point. So you can actually, if you're clear and you're clean and your purpose is selfless and open, and by selfless I don't mean that you don't have the desire for adventure and development and growth or anything like that. You can follow the emanations or astral planes or versions of the one light. You can follow that all the way into divinity itself. If they let you pass, then you will be able to access that. There are laws that govern this kind of thing. So anyway, so what we're doing is there's the issue. This is really peculiar and kind of critical. Is the issue of losing time, because what happens when you lose time in meditation? There's a what you encounter within the self or the belief system. Its intensity, it doesn't change, but it's not the sort of intensity that you would normally encounter when you're busily walking around in your daily life. So because there's a lack of time, you may feel, in other words, like if you have if you have a belief system throughout this process, you're probably going to run into this. If you have a belief that fears that you're not capable of achieving selflessness or the ultra conscious, that is something that is a big mystery, because if you haven't achieved it before, then you won't truly know. But given the effect of tenacity and a non-yielding approach when it comes to the feeling or sensation of giving up, it will benefit you to know that as an inordinate amount of time passes, it may seem like no time has passed, and you're being barraged or confronted with the idea or belief that you're stuck, you're not making progress, you're not capable, whatever the belief is. This is a really good sign, actually. It means that you're starting to get deep enough in the process that you're threatening the hold that the ego has on you subconsciously. So the idea is to work within the belief system. In other words, when I was in a particular point in my process, I believed that I was stuck, and I was having a great deal of trouble getting unstuck, because I didn't realize that the belief that I was stuck was actually perpetuating the experience of feeling stuck. And so I had to question whether or not I was actually stuck, or I was actually producing an experience that I was stuck. And so this principle of looking at where we are, what we're experiencing relative to our belief system is really important. And I say principle because it could manifest, the ego may manifest in many ways. It will, at certain points, speak to you and warn you that you're heading towards jeopardy, that you could sabotage your livelihood or your whatever. This is all just the the tripe that the ego will produce, and it's a really good sign, because it really means that you're actually starting to take back territory that we or you had given up to the ego prior to this experience. And so, to continue with this movement, you're basically going to go through each structure, and I think what I experience is that of the 3 or 4 wave structure planes that I went through, and depending upon your energy level, it'll either be really slow or it'll be quick. It just depends. And there's no reason to rush through it, but just understand that your level of energy, like I expressed before, it's important to have a way of energizing your system, which you can do. You can find many breathing exercises in Kriya Yoga. Babaji documented 144 techniques. There are a lot of breathing exercises. That's the least of your worries when it comes to generating energy. But basically, I think what happened is that when I went into the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th plane, what I encountered were, I started to encounter beliefs, false beliefs, that I never really completely confronted them. And so I'll speak at this point about the fact that the ego rests on a foundation of 2 core beliefs that we adopt from our parents. And so my 2 core beliefs, or false beliefs, and again, understand that I'm not talking about fear. Fear is produced more from belief than thought or anything else. But my 2 core beliefs are the belief that I'll fail and the belief that I'm not good enough. And so that's what I encountered journeying deeper towards the ultra conscious, my true self. And it was really, really difficult for me because I didn't realize how much I believed in those false beliefs. These are all things, and all things that you encounter, you have the option at any time to resolve these issues as you confront them, false or not. And it is best to do this with an open heart. I failed to mention that earlier, but it's really important to open your heart as you're focusing into, as you're moving towards light. The beautiful thing about this process, like I've mentioned, but I'm going to expound on a little bit, is that as you confront these core false beliefs, as you continue to do these meditations, and I hope you do day to day, they really do build on each other. You'll encounter, you'll go in and out of a different view of reality in your outer daily life also, I believe. And if it's slow to come, it's slow to come. It doesn't really matter. But basically, my real turning point in the movement towards the greater consciousness was in that I had to really go through the almost like, I almost want to call it the subconscious version of the ego, but it's not. It's where my subconscious, my dormant conscious, really did believe. Not that I didn't counter those false beliefs with affirmations or mantras or whatever. It did help to affirm that I am good enough and that I will succeed, etc. And you'll have to maybe adopt some kind of affirmation just to counter the false beliefs. But you can also do this by serving other people and fulfilling your gifts and talents, etc. Because it proves to the deeper aspect of our belief system or belief self that that we are worthwhile, that we are adequate, that we can succeed, that there is hope, etc. So I'm trying to remember back so I can clarify you what I experienced might help you in your journey with this. At this point, before the fifth plane, in my opinion, there's no real reason to. You don't want to drift into the astral world from you don't want to do it without really knowing what you're doing. So, what I'm trying to say is that it'll be tempting to. Basically, the first thing the egos do is going to try to put you to sleep while you start to meditate, especially if you're a novice. You have to understand that people attempt to meditate and they go, I just can't stay awake. I just can't focus. All that is the activity of the ego. It's really the challenge of it all. So, in other words, expect to have trouble staying alert and focused. Expect to drift and forget and fall asleep, but that's just all part of the process, So, if you're in a quiet state and you begin the movement and you begin traversing through these layers, basically what you really want to do, and maybe what you should do, and what I should have said earlier, is that you want to really. You're going to have to master silence at some point in this, because there's a point in the process where you won't be able to get away with being slightly in your head and moving deeper into the spiritual nature. Because as you know, that the head is a dualistic function, and if you don't really let go and become ultra quiet you're going to have trouble with that. But that's fine. It's just something that you should be aware of. You'll be held to task by this the more you get deeper into the true self, or closer to it. You will realize that your true self is always around you. In fact, what I was encountering, I think I failed to mention this. There's this really spooky thing that happened to me where I think it was when I was reading Man's Eternal Quest by Paramahansa Yogananda. He spoke about the astral body, the invisible man, he calls it, and how the astral consciousness, the greater consciousness, is right behind us. And I was like, if it's right behind us, then it should hear me, it should communicate with me. At this point I was separate, so I was like, where are you? Asking my astral consciousness, and I would hear, I'm right behind you. Every time I asked, that's what I would say to myself. This may sound a little weird, because you can actually have a conversation with your greater self. You don't want to do this in the mind, but you can have this conversation because the lesser consciousness is functioning on a different frequency than the greater consciousness, and that's why there's a delay. The greater consciousness is functioning on a frequency of the movement of light, at least. And so there are these other attributes that I'm going to describe about it, but if you ask yourself, ask your greater consciousness or your astral self where he or she is, not that there's a male or female to any of this, but you will hear that voice, and it may freak you out. It freaked me out, and I didn't trust it. I thought I was in self-delusion or deception, and I realized, though, when I was really quiet, and I knew that you want to get to a point where you know the signature or the signature really of the ego and how it speaks, because it will adopt different voices, as you know. They seem to become our own thoughts, and it becomes a tangled mess. That's why it's really imperative to pretty much master egolessness to as much, to as deep a degree as you can, and you can accomplish that by simply practicing the quietness, the mindless state. The better you get at that, the less trouble you're going to have later. Because what happens later is that you not only lose time in this process, is that you will lose space. And that may not sound like a big deal right now, but when you lose objectivity, in other words, we are here relative to there. We always have these things in our life that allow us this existence in the material consciousness where I'd say, well, I'm okay because I'm not doing as poorly as they are. They're out of their minds, so I feel pretty sane. This becomes a subconscious thing. And so it becomes a very real subconscious experience when we lose space, because we lose our relativity. The space and time loss represents really the loss of a form of objectivity that we used to rely on. So you're going to encounter that. Hopefully you'll survive all this. I'm just kidding. But it's pretty interesting. I don't recommend doing this without faith in a God of light. I really don't. There's no reason to. If you have trouble with that, if you believe that there's no God, that's complete and utter nonsense. I'm not going to ever produce any material or try to validate the fact that God is very real. God is what actually created your spiritual consciousness. And so you're not ever, in truth, disconnected. There's only the illusion of being separate from God. You're never, ever truly separate from all that is, ever. And so if you're going to pretend or play that game of, well, I don't believe in God because of this, that, and the other, just put that away. There's no room for that here. The reason why I say it too is that the transitions that I was able to make, only was it possible through faith in God. And so if your faith is in some kind of an entity that is there to provide and protect for you, that is omniscient and omnipresent, and holds you absolutely dear to itself, then that's fine. It doesn't matter what version. It's just reality is that I think you understand what I'm trying to say. So as we move deeper into or towards the true self, we're definitely going to start threatening the ego. And so this is, like I said before, it's really great that you encounter deep fear. It's great that you'll encounter deep discomfort. It's great that you encounter the fear of the loss of yourself and loss of your life, and maybe be the fear that you'll be overwhelmed and you'll disappear and vanish and never come back. You don't have to continue this, you know what I mean? What I'm trying to explain to you is that you will encounter a point where you will have the opportunity to allow your lesser self to die, and this is what is referred to as the lesser death, or transcendence, or the real wake up to the greater reality through the greater consciousness. I guess people that have already tried doing things their own way for year after year after year will be more interested in this kind of thing, because I don't understand why somebody would be that interested in suffering a death. But we'll all have to die and suffer the death of the ego anyway. So basically what I'm trying to say, though, is that as you experience fears like that, the quieter you get, and the more you accept the fears, the more you'll sense that they're not true. And you'll realize that when you're suffering a fear, you're suffering a delusion, or you're suffering a... it's really kind of funny, because the sufferer and the suffering, the vehicle of suffering, are two separate things. So in other words, you can't have a fear and have it not come true at the same time. So, in other words, the observer inside you will be... the problem with this, to me, is that the observer, the true self, is so quiet that when the inner little self is fumbling around and petrifyingly trying to manage this, that, and the other, fear or mechanism of false belief or whatever, if you just stop, if you just tell your ego to go guard a door somewhere, if you just really stop and you depend on your outer, the greater consciousness will always be, it's actually, I think it's right behind our peripheral vision, our spiritual or our material consciousness, or egotistical vision. I don't know what to call it. You'll come up with your own terminology. Maybe you'll have better terminology than I do. You'll notice that there's a quietness about you, even though you're entranced with some deluded fear, or however real it may seem to you. There'll always be an aspect of your full consciousness that doesn't believe in what you're struggling with. And again, there's this duality. And come back to this duality over and over again, and the ability to shift the focus from handling a falsehood, letting it go, and then becoming the entity or the will that actually decided to let that thing go. So you'll understand that if you're embracing a fear or a falsehood, however real it is, the idea would be, the acid test is to let it go and see what happens. This is not easy to do, and that's why I view this as a spiritual process in itself, the movement towards cultivating the ability to fly around in the astral world. I think that should help. That should help get you started, one of the things that I want to point out is that there's no reason to seek all the pain that you're, and there's not an inordinate amount of it, but the pain that you're going to suffer learning to be quiet and learning to be at rest isn't going to be any easier if somebody's guiding you through it. So I'm not going to be able to say or do anything, nor have I ever read or contemplated or been taught anything that's actually helped me in this navigation towards the greater self, because these are all symbols. You understand that what I'm saying isn't going to alleviate any of the pain that you may have to traverse or encounter and digest and resolve and forgive, etc., in this path. The words, obviously, the concepts, are all symbols that represent things that I believe you will encounter. So I'm just trying to point out that this is a $0, practice. You don't need to, you really don't need to hire anyone to teach you how to meditate. What you probably need maybe is encouragement to never give up. It's like, in other words, once you decide to master quiet, or master thoughtlessness, or master whatever in meditation, the real issue is simply don't give up. And if you give up one day, just continue the next, or as soon as you possibly can. And remember that they do build on each other, so the longer you don't do the work, the harder it will be to remember where you were at, to reassimilate back to where you were at when you had made that progress. And it shouldn't take too long to come back, even if you let it go for a couple months. I'm not certain, though, but the best thing that I've found is the easiest thing to do relative to tenacity, to this light, unyielding, intense approach. This intense approach filled with effortless effort is to ask God for help, to let go of the ego as best you can. You'll encounter the deeper ego later, to detach from thought. Just allow everything to be as it is. If you want to observe and watch, that's fine. It's good practice, because you'll realize that anything that you're able to look at, you're separate from. These help, I believe, in the long run too. In other words, you don't know what you are, and you don't feel what you are. So if you're feeling fear, you know that it's an illusion, because we can't feel. In other words, we feel only what we are not. So if I'm coming into contact with a belief, the point at which I'm touching it or experiencing it is the point at which I'm going to fear the belief if it's suggesting a threat, etc. The idea is to not embrace the fear, thereby perpetuating it. This is the energy that perpetuates the fear. So if you encounter a fear, don't embrace it. Or if you do embrace it lightly and allow it to pass. It will pass through you. Fear basically wants to pass through you. I don't know why that is, but it's as though they simply are on this, it's not a roller coaster, but it's almost, it's similar to that. But you're not in the cars. The cars are actually coming towards you. The path is, the rails are what we're more interested in than the cars that are threatening to run us over. So, but the basic point is that I don't know how to word this better. If you are suffering from something, it simply means that that's not what you are. It can't happen because it's only able to threaten. This is our challenge. So when we're threatened with the dissolution of self, or not being able to make it back. Like, people talk about that a lot online. They're like, you have to be really careful because you can get stuck out there. It's like, it's complete nonsense. Basically, the best approach is through acceptance. Acceptance will burn away all of this nonsense. Also, if you're in the habit of, what you can do also is allow your heart to shine upward into your consciousness. If you stay with that, it'll burn away the activity here. And the reason why that is that the light of the heart will act on the delusion of the consciousness. It is, in a sense, the great balancer. The intuition and the reason aspect of the consciousness, but those two things are also at once unified. But instead of projecting your heart simply outward into the nothingness or whatever, you can focus it towards your consciousness. What this brings up too is as you move towards center, not restricting the outer flow of energy, because in other words, you don't want to move to center except later. There's the capture issue, and I'll talk about that, where you're capturing energy and condensing it. But what you want to do is transparently, if that's possible, move towards center. You'll start to, what'll happen is the medulla oblongata will start to vibrate, and it may make you a little dizzy at times. You may fall in and out of consciousness at times. These are transition points that may help you. You may not need to do that. You may be accustomed to a light trance state, alpha, beta, delta, gamma, whatever. But there is this whole teaching, I think the Ekankar gets into this, but the yogis also do this, is that they channel energy into the Abdullah to increase its frequency. The higher the frequency, the deeper you're going. And so remember, we're kind of dealing with an inverted conscious reality state here. So when you say that we're going deeper, we're actually going higher. When the frequency goes higher, we go deeper, but as we go deeper, we expand. So the terminologies, it's not that, I don't think, important to understand it. If you have a lot of trouble with the ego in your outer daily life, I can only suggest to try as best you can to develop a lifestyle of service to others. The thoughts, intentions, contemplation, deciding for others what kind of help they should or should not get from you, all that's nonsense. Throw it out. Just commit as best you can to developing a lifestyle of service to others. That'll it'll help you heal from the imprint or the echo effect of the ego on your heart. Okay, and as my teacher Makarta told me, she said, I've never seen the heart teach falsehood, but I've seen the ego teach the heart falsehood. And so we may have some trauma, residual trauma, as a result of having endured and belabored or struggled with false beliefs, and that's part of this whole process, though. So fifth plane. So the fifth plane is basically, in my opinion at this point, and a lot of this is like, I haven't solidified any of my conclusions yet about this. I'm still in process to mastering the travel. I have it, but there's a pure mastership that I'm working towards, and I'll be able to clarify many things later. If you have questions, there'll be a place to make contact. If you have struggles, make contact. All your questions will be answered. What happened with me is that I basically got quiet enough that I could actually feel the presence of my ultra consciousness around me. And it was behind me, and what I heard it say was back up. And so there is this movement where you can, with intention, through intention, you can back up. The reason why I pause is that because this is a faith-based endeavor, when I say intention, it is literally a Zen movement where you're allowing the movement or the process that we would normally cultivate to take us from here to there. We don't need that kind of control. We don't need that kind of knowledge, because intention will do the moving. And so through faith and intention, know that you're backing up. But you can back up towards the greater self, let go of the activity, the noise, just continue to let it go. Again, we're not forcing, we're not suppressing, we're not spinning, we're not doing any of that. All that does is provide energy to the ego, and it'll perpetuate the activity. Okay. So as I backed up at one point, there was a point, I don't even know if I can remember it clearly for you, but there was a point where I asked myself, what if you are now in the greater consciousness and you're not sensing it, you're not recognizing it? As I continued to let go, and as I continued to detach from the need and the concept of detachment, and allowed detachment to become more of a constant, more of a vehicle than an event after event after event of detaching from things and thoughts and places, etc. I eventually realized and discovered that my greater consciousness was right here. And what happened is that my lesser consciousness immediately realized that it meant a kind of death, that it wasn't the end-all be-all consciousness, and I watched it recede as I let go into the greater consciousness. And that, I don't think that I can word for you. I think that probably is going to be a very personal experience for each individual, and they'll have, maybe others will have a similar way of expressing it, but when you, I'm trying to remember some of the other issues that come up. The one thing that comes up comes to mind is never ever try to do what you have done in the past in meditation. The ego basically will, the first temptation that will, other than failure, regard failure as a temptation, not a condition, not as a potential reality, in my opinion. But basically what the ego, one of the things the ego, and I still have trouble with this, is that my tendency is to try to repeat the process which led to a prior success over again, to repeat that over again. And that is killer in this, because you can't, nature abhors redundancy, and we're of nature. The only thing that would try to produce a repetition or redundancy or duplication of the past is the ego. Okay, so that's really important to understand. And you may start to, if you haven't already experienced this, you may start to regard the letting go and the detachment, which the Buddhists speak a lot about, with maybe a different form of respect, because it is a lot to ask. It's a great challenge in my view, but it's possible through tenacity. It's all of this. Everything you're looking for is possible through tenacity. It's funny because one of the yogis said, beg, demand of God, like a child, demand that He reveal Himself to you. And eventually God will do that. If you're in the light, even at times, well, you have to be you have to allow yourself to elevate into the light. If you're spending time below there's a horizon of a division. That's the other thing that I want to also get into, is that there's a horizon. There's the heavier, darker planes in the astral, and then there's the lighter ones above that. Remember that I'm inverting it, so it's really the torus, that shape where we're going in, but as we go in, we go outward. So I don't think that's necessary to understand. If you stay center and let go of everything and continue to move deeper towards the center, you'll encounter exactly what you need to encounter to move forward. But there is a way of, I'm going to move my head because there's a, if I can do this here, in the vision chakra, what I was accustomed to doing, because of the way that my egotistical consciousness was geared at looking downward into reality, I had to withdraw my vision or withdraw my focus from out of the ego, and then what you can do is pull back your focus or self or will, and then look up through the upper part of the I don't know if I can show you this. It's almost like there's a way to look up through the top of the vision chakra, and there's also, I think, there's some issue between the crown chakra on top of the head and a chakra between the vision chakra and there's 3 chakras here, and so that might become necessary for you to be aware of. Okay, so having said that, the conscience, I spoke a little bit about the conscience. There are many things that humankind have, in my opinion, endeavored to do with distorted, no or little success through the mind. I'll probably bring this up over and over again, how important it is to not engage your conscience through the mind, or God, or any other real entity. So once you acquire quiet, a silent state, the mindless state, then ask your questions to God. Then ask your questions to your greater self, which is you're really taking care of. It tends to the lesser self. It is possible for you to develop a very personal and a very real relationship to God, because God, in my experience, is extremely available because of the omnipresence that Baal possesses. So I have experienced that Christ conscious state once before, and it's very interesting, because you're at once you're connected to everything in this world at one time. You're aware of and can sense every single aspect of the world at one time. I have experienced that, and I hope to experience that again. That is what the yogis refer to as Christ consciousness. What the yogis do, and what Jesus did, and they'll continue to do, especially through Kriya Yoga and other forms of Kriya Yoga, is from the Christ consciousness, they made the commitment to live completely without the self, and were able to access God consciousness. So basically what they're doing is they're allowing their consciousness to form a kind of conical vortex into undivided light, down into dualistic reality. That's why you might see, if you look for Baal to guide you, you may see the triangle, which I believe is a representation of Baal. Is, in other words, so there's God, which is all that is and all that is not, and then Baal is God in human form. So you have the one, which is all that is, and then you have the two, which is the dualistic. All right, so one of the things that's really interesting about, there are clarifiers where there are legitimate clarifiers that I can share with you about the nature of the ultra consciousness, and one is, and it's actually everything in a sense, is that it's omnipolar. And so you'll encounter a lot of, you may encounter a lot of disorientation, but a conviction to your central will and the constant, perpetual willingness to let go of the whatever is happening around you, because you'll get really small and maybe see large objects, or objects that are supposed to be small to you may be huge or whatever. But the clarifier, one of the clarifiers, is that you probably have, I'm not certain about the numbering the planes yet. I'm not certain yet. I'm going to do that, but it's probably the 5th, 6th, it might even be the 7th plane, where you're basically in the omnipolar state, where you are in when it was said, and I heard a while back that God created us in His image, I so never understood what that meant. But there's what God did, and it's not doable in this reality, in the 3D reality, up to the 4, I believe, is God created us in a way that if you imagine it, it will come into being. And the really neat thing is that we're at this point, we're no longer victim, with great practice perhaps, but we're no longer victim to, fear of self-betrayal, fear of imagining something that, that could hurt us. You won't experience any of that kind of fear, because you're not going to be in the dualistic state when you're in the super consciousness. But one of the most incredible things that you will experience is that if you drift into a thought or an object, or in other words, if you imagine a lizard or a tree or whatever, you can drift into it and literally become it for a moment or two, and maybe indefinitely. I haven't tried that, but you'll come right back into your true self. So there's this really interesting, it's really this interesting fabric of light that God made us into, which has the ability to take on other form. And I guess maybe some people call this shape-shifting. I think I don't know what you would call it, but it's a great deal of fun. It's a huge adventure to have. What you're going to see too, in the structural side of the astral, you're going to see extremely thin conical spiraling tubes that have on the end point, at least what I saw at the ring or border of, or at the end wherein there is a portal, are their hands. It seemed like that's what I was seeing, but it was ringed with hands. They're probably caretakers, I don't know. But anyway, those portals are all accessible, and you can go into these portals. Some of them, in my experience, I traveled into some of the portals from the ultra consciousness, and it's almost like you're falling asleep into another state. And it appears that they are whatever you would say, wormhole, whatever you would call it, but they definitely seem to be able to take me to places that are not of this world. So obviously there's a great deal to explore, because I'm going to explain that the content of space, the worlds in the universe, all have astral versions of them. And so they have their similar dense 3D, oh, I forgot to tell you about that. They have their dense 3D version, on their own physical, on the planet, but they also have astral versions or planes too. There's one thing that I forgot to tell you, is that you can test this all out without accessing the ultra consciousness, the astral body. If you clear your mind, like I said, if you detach from the ego, like I said, if you detach from thought, like I said, in truth, and this is really an issue of authenticity and honesty and humility, when you master that, when you're in that state, if you look through the vision chakra, behind this wall of darkness that you'll see whenever you close your eyes, you will be able to see the astral world. And actually, Babaji, and I agree with what he said. It's funny because everything that the yogis talk about with the astral I've found it to be absolutely true. But what he said is that it's easier to see the astral with your eyes open. And so the problem with this is that we don't want to mistake our imagination for the astral. This is where everyone gets into trouble. And so there are these rules, and one of the rules is what Christ said. One of the things that Christ said is that when the two are made one, then that individual will see the great reality. And you'll see this over and over again, where when duality or the illusion of it is reunified, in a sense, when the transition to reunification or atonement, which is not, there's that ugly Catholic version of the word atonement. It really has nothing to do with that. It's about at-one-ment. And so we're basically detaching from the dualities, and we're becoming one or single, which is what we are, is we're one entity. But what you can do is when you look through the vision chakra, and if you look, it's almost like, you can almost say that it's almost like the astral is like, relative to this space-time hologram, the astral is like 3 or 4 or 5 feet behind the wall of darkness that you see when you close your eyes. And so if you're looking through your single vision chakra, and you say, you have to have an intention, and you can say, God, please show me something, or I'd like to see, the city of light, there's a city of a kind of pure gold in the astral world. There are many cities. You can actually move through your conscious chakra, and you can traverse the astral world, and you can look around, but there's a kind of movement that it only works through intention. And so once you get to the point where you can differentiate between what your imagination is and when and how and if and whether or not the ego is attempting deception and all that, once you get quiet and you learn that, the clarity, you can travel without using your astral body. And you can go all the way up through the divinity planes. Well, I've done it, and you can actually go up into the library and read in the Akashic records. It requires an inordinate amount of concentration and faith. It's almost as though I'd like to say that faith is a vehicle of travel. And it's really funny too, because there's this really weird thing about belief, where you can actually create a belief, and you'll experience the creation of that belief, or at minimum you'll experience the movement into the belief, if I'm wording it properly. But basically what I'm trying to say is that there's this, what I had trouble with, and I still do at times, is when I'm anticipating, especially if I had success with movement in the astral, my second experience, or the prevention of my second experience, would often come times with like a kind of self-consciousness where I was anticipating what was going to happen, and I wasn't letting go of myself, but I had forgotten. I thought I had, on many occasions I thought I had, but I wasn't able to transition or move or experience the astral because I wanted to watch it. I wanted to watch the transition into the astral happen while I was conscious. And I mentioned earlier there are these points where I think at this point I would say that there's this movement. It's almost like, you know, when you fall asleep and you catch yourself, you feel that you're falling, and you catch yourself, or you're tripping or stumbling, you catch yourself. That is the falling in, which we do in the astral and on the spiritual path. It's all the inward. But the same technique can be applied in the astral, where you're actually falling. I did mention it earlier, where you're kind of allowing yourself to slip into a slight sleep state for just a moment, so that you can reattach and realign to a different reality. So it's not easy for me to do that. Well, that's not true. I don't attempt to do that from any state other than the ultra conscious state now, because it's the hardest thing to do. It seems like it requires more faith to do that from. There's got to be someone will eventually come along and be able to. Maybe I'll be able to do it later, to define the varying degrees of consciousness, because it's a little bit. It seems like it's a little bit more intricate than I'm giving credit to. I did want to speak about some of the. It's really interesting. The Gnostic Gospels were discovered in 1945, and through a series of ridiculousness, they eventually were. I think the majority of them, other than the ones that were burned for fire, for kindling, were compiled in full English in 1977. In my opinion, at this point, what I believe is that Christ manifested. It's kind of funny, because Christ manifested at least 3 times within the last 2,000 years. Supposedly over an 800-year period, he died and remanifested 3 times. And some people believe that St. Thomas was the 4th incarnation. I'm not certain about that. I bring him up because Christ came, I'll probably get some flack for this, but Christ came out of the East, and but that the entities, Elijah, John the Baptist, and Jesus Christ, were compiled by the Catholic Church into one entity they refer to as Jesus Christ. Krishna is another entity that acquired Christ consciousness, and there are many. And I'm not trying to suggest that Christ is. He may actually be a very particular creation of God. I really don't know. My point in bringing this up is that the Christ conscious state is accessible to all of us, and we are intended to access it. As you may be familiar, there are several religious groups that, when Christ said, and it's really kind of funny because there's a transcript in the Gnostic text where Christ is explaining to his disciples that the kingdom of heaven is here, it's all around you, it's within you. And over again, his disciples would ask him, right after he said that, when is the kingdom of heaven coming? How will we recognize it? And it's kind of hilarious because the kingdom of heaven is within us. And when I speak about traversing the astral planes, going deeper and deeper and higher toward divinity, that basically is the path. And so you don't have to do it inwardly, like I said before. If you live more and more selflessly in your daily life, you'll experience enlightenment to whatever degree that you intend or supposed to have, etc. But I thought it was really funny that we've been completely conditioned to believe that that the kingdom isn't within us, that we're not able to access the kingdom without going through the clergy or, the bishops or the popes, etc., etc. So this has been a major plague for humankind over the last couple thousand years, which is completely false. It's unnecessary. But again, it's like, if it's part of your belief system, you're probably only going to find, there are mystical aspects of Christianity or versions of Catholicism that lean into the mystic, which is really, to me, now see what happened is that the religious, the religions of the world have claimed spirituality and have made the mystic, esoteric, occult, this darker, less stable version of, unnecessary really to spirituality, but in actuality mysticism is spirituality, and anything less than that is it's erroneous. It's just tripe from the ego intellect. The book that I really want to mention, and I think I did mention it before, but I want to make sure that I did, is Man's Eternal Quest by Paramahansa Yogananda. Everything that you need to reach a spiritual state of enlightenment is in that book. Everything. Everything that I've experienced is in that book. And everything that I'm going to experience is in that book. It's an amazing book. And one of the other Babas or yogis said, when somebody asked Baba why he wasn't writing any books, because he had reached God consciousness, he said that all the books have been written. And I believe he was speaking at least in part about that one book. But there's a quote. There's a quote by Christ that says, those that make the male and female one, the upper and the lower as one, or the same, the inner and outer the same, the two, the one, it's constant. They'll experience the kingdom of heaven. So in truth, and it is true, everything that is in the center is real. So you can let go of everything outside of your sacred center. That's the safest place to be, is within the center. The issue is to just simply not stop at peace in your meditations. Don't stop at serenity. Just continue. If you want to find the ultra-conscious, which will then take you to divinity, just continue. That's all you have to do. I think I'm going to conclude this video here. I appreciate your time, and I hope this has been of value to you. And like I said earlier, there will be contact information. If you have any questions, I don't know that if I can help you answer them or not. I certainly will attempt to find you the individuals or communities or groups that can help you. I know that there is so much misunderstanding out there. I want to also just say that the Self-Realization Fellowship originated in India. They have ashrams or temples in Las Vegas, Belgium, I believe in San Diego, Los Angeles, and at the Chelsea Hotel in New York City, which is where I met Baba Ganapati. But they will, if you go online and you enter in, if you just Google Self-Realization Fellowship, I don't know what the fee is, but they will send you lessons which will cultivate your ability to move into enlightenment. And I don't know what it costs. I doubt that it's a lot, as they are, to me, one of the foremost authentic spiritual practices or studies that's available. And I'm trying to think of other resources, but I will continue this. I'll continue this this work with other videos on other topics. Probably some, detailed, more in-depth topics like humility and faith and other things like that. But thanks very much.